If you're looking for a used overland vehicle from the last 20 years or so, you should consider a Lexus. Now I know what you're thinking. Lexus is a city SUV, they're built to stay on pavement, and my favorite, which I've heard, is why buy a super expensive Lexus when you can get a Toyota? Now stick with me. I will explain why most of this isn't true. What a lot of people don't realize is that Toyota and Lexus share several platforms, with the chassis, the drivetrain, and the four-wheel drive systems often being exactly the same between the two. For this video, there really are two Lexus ranges that I'm going to talk about. There are the Lexus GX models and the Lexus LX models, and both of them are often referred to as basically a Land Cruiser. If you've not heard of a Land Cruiser, then I don't really know what to tell you other than they are known for their legendary durability and reliability, while also being relatively capable off-roaders. Tour vehicles that take dirt roads in South America use a Land Cruiser. United Nations missions in Africa use a Land Cruiser. Aid organizations in Asia, they use a Land Cruiser. Bad guys in actually, let's not mention that one. The Lexus LX series shares its drivetrain, its frame, and most of the body with the Land Cruiser 80, 100, and 200 series, depending on which model LX you get. The Lexus GX shares most of its features with the Land Cruiser Prado 120 and 150, and also has a lot of similarities with the Toyota 4Runner. Both the GX and the LX have full-time four-wheel drive without a two-wheel drive option or even a two-wheel drive selection. They both have 4-low and a separately selectable center lock. That means for those twisting mountain passes, you can be in low range for the gearing, but you can leave the center open to help with the cornering, which is really nice. Older LX and GX models are going to be just as capable as their Toyota counterparts, since they basically have the same body and bumper setups, and then the same or just similar suspension setups, as well as the exact same A-Track system. A-Track is a system that brakes a slipping wheel, so if you lift a wheel up in the air, the system will brake that wheel, which allows that torque to be transferred to the other wheel that's hopefully on the ground and has grip. It's a very effective way of getting through obstacles without a locker, and is found on pretty much all of the off-road capable Toyota and Lexuses from the last 22 to 25 years as of filming. The LX 570 comes standard with crawl control and multi-terrain select. The multi-terrain select option allows you to tune how the A-Track responds depending on the terrain that you're on. If you're on a grippy surface like rock, you want the A-Track to respond immediately and stop all wheel travel, all wheel spinning. If you're in the mud or loose gravel, then you don't want it to be as aggressive. You want to allow some spinning. If you're in mud or loose gravel, then you want it to be less aggressive. You want it to allow some spinning to either clear mud out of the tread, or so that you don't lose momentum on something that may be loose gravel. Crawl control is like an off-road cruise control, which uses the most aggressive A-Track setting. It drives you at a constant speed that is selectable while braking for any slipping that happens. It is great for people who struggle with throttle control, but I've never had a situation where crawl control got me over something that multi-terrain select couldn't. Like the 5th gen 4Runner, crawl control and multi-terrain select come as an option on the higher trim levels on the GX 460, but unlike the 4Runner, you can actually very easily add both to any GX that is built between 2010 and 2019 just by plugging in a couple of modules. The only thing that a 4Runner gets that the GX doesn't is a rear locker that is found on the TRD Off-Road and the TRD Pro trims, as well as the original Trail Edition trim. While A-Track is effective, it's definitely not going to be as good as a rear locker, and if you really want a rear locker, then sure, you can add it to a GX, but you're probably just better off going with a 4Runner. KDSS is an option on the 5th gen 4Runners, but it is standard on the GX 460. KDSS stands for Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System. It's basically under regular highway driving, it holds the sway bars in place, which minimizes the body roll and gives you much better handling. But for off-road use, it frees up that sway bar, which gives you better articulation. And it is a feature that I really like in my GX. With just a front clearance cut or a front bumper, I'd consider the GX460 to be very slightly more capable than a similar SR5 or limited 5th Gen 4Runner, thanks to the KDSS and Multi-Train Select. And that's coming from a guy that has owned and used both. Once you get into the TRD Off-Road or the original Trail Edition or the TRD Pro trims, then the 4Runner comes out on top, just thanks to that rear locker. The LX470 and the LX570 come with another feature as standard that can help off-road, and that is AHC. AHC stands for Active Height Control, and it uses a hydraulic system to raise and lower the vehicle, which is great for loading the vehicle up, or if you want to raise it up to get over obstacles. On the LX470, you can install a small module from SLE that keeps it in a higher setting, and on the LX570, you can actually just change the sensor position, which tricks the vehicle into lifting it higher, which basically gives you a lifted vehicle at very low cost or even free. It's worth noting that some of the higher trim levels on the GX also have AHC, but it is based on air, not hydraulics, and it only raises the rear of the vehicle. You can also get AHC as a very rare option on some of the 100 series Toyota Land Cruisers. The downside to AHC is that it will eventually go bad, usually after around 200,000 miles, and at that stage it's either going to be a really expensive repair or you're probably better off just switching to a traditional suspension setup with a lift. But we'll talk more about reliability later. I like cushy interiors when I'm spending all day driving, so the Lexus range is perfect for me. You will have some of the most comfortable leather seats and small conveniences that you just don't see in Toyotas, as well as a very quiet driving experience when especially compared to the 4Runner. And that makes a big deal, or is a big deal when you're driving long distances. Heated seats are also standard across all of them, and most come with ventilated seats too. And that is something that is really nice to have out in the desert. The back of the Lexuses also have a vent above the window for AC and heat, which is great if you've got kids, especially ones in a rear-facing car seat. In the GX, you also typically get better engines and transmissions. The GX 470 came standard with the 4.7 liter V8, which was a less common option in the 4th Gen 4Runner, and also had a 5-speed transmission, where the early model 4th Gen 4Runners only had a 4-speed. The GX 460 has the 4.6 liter V8, which, while I will admit is still quite underpowered, it is a lot more responsive and far quieter than the 4-liter V6 found in the 5th Gen 4Runner. Pair that with a 6-speed transmission versus Toyota's 5-speed, and it's just a better driving experience all around, and actually usually ends up with similar fuel economy on the highway. While we were out on the trail in my buddy's $12,000 Lexus LX470, we had a couple of guys roll past us in what I would guess were probably about $40,000 Jeeps, and one of them said, "You must have more money than sense taking a Lexus off-road." And while that is probably true of my buddy, the crazy thing is that even though these Lexuses are luxury versions of Toyotas with more power, more features, and more comfort, a used Lexus is often cheaper than the equivalent Toyota. You can actually often pick them up for a lot less than a Jeep too, like my buddy did. When it came time to buy a replacement for my Jeep, I originally looked at 4Runners, but it quickly became clear that I could get a much better Lexus for less. My GX 460 ended up costing about $2,000 less than I could find for the same year and mileage 4Runner, and the 4Runners I was looking at had cloth seats. They're just base models. My buddy owns that Lexus LX470 and the LX570, and both times he actually started looking at Toyota Land Cruisers, and both times ended up with it being cheaper to buy the Lexus version. The only extra cost to consider is that all of the Lexus models recommend premium gas, where the Toyotas recommend regular. And I say recommend rather than require because that's what Lexus say. And this will upset some people, but I've run my GX off both regular and premium for long-term tests and have seen exactly no difference. I have more recently been exclusively putting premium in, and I find myself questioning why. Because of all the similarities, you can expect similar reliability in a Lexus as you can a Toyota. Although the Lexus typically sits just above Toyota in the reliability listings year after year, they're going to be almost identical across the LX and GX models. The biggest thing to consider, especially if you're getting an older Lexus, is that things like the LX have a couple more advanced features that might go wrong, although that's something that you typically don't see until it's at least a decade old. Both the LX 470 and the GX 470 have Toyota's 4.7-liter V8, which is known to be one of the most reliable engines that Toyota have ever made, but it does require regular maintenance. Roughly every 90,000 miles you want to replace the timing belt and the water pump, but that's no different for the same year Land Cruiser or the V8 4Runner. The GX 460 and the 5th Gen 4Runner are also going to have similar reliability thanks to many of their shared parts, but I'd argue that the 4Runner slightly wins in this case. Although the GX is still known for incredible reliability, the 4.6-liter V8 is known to have a couple of rare issues that the 4Runner's 4-liter V6 just doesn't. Then if you're looking at the LX 570, it's the 5.7-liter V8, which you really can't go wrong with. Something else to consider if you are looking at buying a Lexus or Toyota is that there's a good chance the Lexus has been very well maintained. All of the ones that I shopped for had only ever been driven by real estate agents and only ever serviced at Lexus dealers. That being said, make sure you test 4Low and the center lock, because most of these people that have owned them previously have only ever driven them on the road and don't even know what those buttons do. There are another couple of downsides to getting a Lexus over a Toyota. Lexuses usually have lower bumpers and running boards, for example. The GX 460 has particularly poor approach and breakover angles, which make it pretty bad for anything other than dirt roads in its stock form. And for comparison, the same year 4Runner is not going to have any of those problems. To do anything technical, the Lexus GX is going to need some modifications. You can do some cutting and removing of parts to gain the clearance, or you can even add a lift and bumpers. And once that's done, the GX is going to be as capable, or maybe even slightly more capable, than a non-TRD off-road or non-TRD Pro 4Runner. Unfortunately, because Lexuses aren't as popular Overlanders and because they're mostly found in the US, there aren't as many parts available for them for modifications. Suspension choices are often the same, but interior and body modifications are less common. I'm not saying they don't exist, because there are plenty, you just don't have as many choices as you would for the Toyota version. Because the parts are more specialized and less common, you might end up spending a little bit more on modifications, which could offset any savings that you had from getting the cheaper vehicle. Something that's worth mentioning here is one big difference I saw between my 4Runner and my Lexus GX is that the 4Runner could fit an oversized spare easily underneath the vehicle, where the GX could not, so I ended up buying a bumper to carry that spare. If you're thinking about getting a used Toyota that's around 5 years old or more, take a serious look at getting a Lexus instead. They're often cheaper and you get a lot more vehicle for your money. If you're buying brand new or very low mileage, then you still get a lot of vehicle, but you're not going to get as good of a deal as you would if you let someone else take that luxury vehicle depreciation. If you want to see what I've been up to with my Lexus, then you can see it in action here when we took it out on some beautiful Idaho trails with a brand new Toyota Land Cruiser and brand new Toyota Tacoma, or you can watch the entire build process from start to finish by clicking over on this side. Thanks for watching.